Out of Africa. Africa has been in my mind because of personal memories and because of knowledge, like the amazing fact that we all trace our roots back to Africa. That's where humanity got started, and that's where we spread from. And some people don't even know this, and some people deny it. It's hard to comprehend. Oh, I go back to Africa. But it makes sense. Africa with the savannas, the abundance of wildlife, seems the perfect place for humanity to evolve. There are other places that are too cold or too many trees. I have, as I learned at the Amazonia. And then we came out, and the way to come out, we have been through what is now Egypt and Palestine, and then go to Mesopotamia, and from there spread out. And every time we had these geographical constraints, like the Africa-Asian passage in what is now the Canal of Suez. Remember, that was a land bridge long ago. The canal is a man-made feature, but it was still a constraint because of the Sinai Peninsula being a desert, hard to cross. So there, civilizations, people settle down and develop what we call civilizations, although many times they are not civilized. And then the Mesopotamia, another constraint, another civilization, and Europe, reaching the corners of Europe, the islands of Greece, Crete civilization, even the Americas, when finally humanity reached the Americas, the constraints of Central America and the jungles, southern Mexico, and the altiplane, in the Andes, geographic constraints again. That's where civilizations develop. So we evolved from Africa, and it's such a wonderful continent. My memories from Africa are one of people who are joyful in their daily routines, in their singing and their amazing singing. In the legends, their stories, so many stories about Africa. I remember having made friends with a Zulu person, and he took me to Zulu village, and then on a Sunday we went to church, and the pastor asked me to say something, and I knew at that point a few Zulu words, and I say good morning and thank you, and my friend was immediately started talking, and I didn't know exactly what he was saying, but I knew by knowing him that he was saying that that's all what I knew. And I said in English, no, that's not true. I know other words, and I would like to say, but I spoke in English, and people were like, oh, so he knows what his friend was saying. And then we took a bunch of kids from the village into town, a rather white town, and we drove a Land Rover, my friend's Land Rover, with at least a dozen kids, and I said, let's stop at the supermarket, and I bought a bunch of ice cream boxes, and like ice cream bars, and we went to the beach, and the kids had ice cream, and ran around, and danced, Then we get a flat tire on the beach of all places, and my friend announced that his spare tire was also flat because he hadn't fixed it after the last time he had a flat. So we were stuck there for a while. Remember once in St. Lucia, I was coming back to my place walking on the beach, and this park ranger, he told me, "You shouldn't go through here." And I was like, "Why?" He was, "Because of the hippopotamus." By the way, the St. Lucia beach is the only place in the world where there's a sign. There are signs on the beach that say, "This beach is dangerous because you may encounter in the water sharks, crocodiles, and hippopotamus." Because the crocodiles and hippopotamus make it from the estuary into the ocean. So the man told me, "You shouldn't go through there because the hippos are out at night." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I know that if I run into one, I'm supposed to climb a tree." And he looked at me like, "Really? You know that?" I had actually practiced, had to climb trees quickly in case I ran into a hippo, because they share paths with humans, and that's the main way people get killed by hippos, because they get run over. I'm sorry, it's not funny. It's one of the leading causes of death by wildlife, run over by hippos, and the number one is being run over by buffaloes. And I actually listened to the man and turned around and hitch a ride back to town. And actually, these guys were driving a sun buggy, and they stopped, and I said, "Can you take me to town?" And they were like, "Sure." And I was like, "But," I look, and they had two seaters, and there were two seats, and there were two people in the car. What? I look at them like saying, "Where am I supposed to go?" And they pointed to the hood. So I sat on the hood of the car to come back to town, and they actually went pretty fast. That was rather crazy. Yeah, they can drive crazy. When I was staying, the landlady one day invited me to, told me, we went together out for dinner, and then on the way back, she had maybe a little bit to drink for dinner, and he just drive. Well, every time we reach a traffic circle, a roundabout, she wouldn't drive straight across and on top of the roundabout. Now, this also can get not funny because and very sad. I remember once being in a restaurant, and these two guys, these two white loud guys came in, and they were talking, and and then after a short while, the police showed up, and I asked what was happening, and they told me that the police were investigating them because there were suspects in having run over a Zulu person on the road coming into town. They hit and killed this man, and then they just drove to the restaurant. I met later in another place the prosecutor who had come to town, and she told me that happened a lot. And there were people like that who just, it was roadkill suddenly. God, and the singing in churches, singing everywhere. It was, the voices, so amazing. The joy in the eyes you see in people who have a very tough life, and how many times I crossed paths with a woman carrying a heavy load on her head, and it's just joy in the eyes. Honest people, I find honest people. Once I was in Durban buying some Zulu books because I was trying to learn the language. I bought some used books in this little stand, just one book. But I have pulled money out, and I know to me I left cash on the table, more cash than I paid for the book. I think it was the equivalent of like $50 maybe. And I left, and when I was walking down the road, the people from the stand chased me, the rich, and they told me, "You left this money on the table." And I was shocked. Where I am from, places I have lived, people wouldn't do that. Their honesty was just a moment of humility for me, because once again I was seeing people of little means choosing the internal compass as opposed to the immediate advantage. Talk about generosity, about not taking. And taken, well, have we taken from Africa? A country that has been exploited so much, literally. You see the mounds from mine pits, open pit mines everywhere, on the trees that were lost, the amazing wildlife, and ultimately the treasure of humanity that was devastated and lost by slavery, slave trade. How could anybody do that? How could anybody chase people down, put people on ships? Bring them to a different continent. That's one of the greatest sins of England and the Americas. The Americas, not only the United States, all the way to South America. We're still dealing with that trauma and the lack of acknowledgement of that trauma. The United States of America, I honor their people for being hard workers. They are some of the hardest working people I know. And that's one of the tenets, one of the three legs in the three-legged stool of the American economy. The other one being the global capitalism that has benefited America. But then the third one is the relentless exploitation of the land and the people. Exploitation of from trees to the Native Americans to the African people who were forced to come and work in America. Of course, this justifies an entire package of discrimination to justify such horrendous crimes. The very continent where we all come from, the very people who are our ancestors, we deemed them inferior. Or they deemed them inferior. I wasn't part of that. I don't think I have any European blood in me, except for one grandfather who is an unknown. We never knew who he was because grandmother wouldn't tell. So maybe the only European blood I have in me is the rapist blood. It's the blood of the one that takes by force. And the Civil War in the United States of America, so many nations had this moment of internal conflict that comes to define the country. And the Civil War in America, what was it ultimately about? It was about two forms of raw capitalism. One where you own people, and one where you pay people to work a salary but still controlling. Was the North really anti-slavery? No, the North was anti one system of exploitation to impose a different system of exploitation that we continue to have to this day. It all goes back to the predatory mindset we carry. The inability we had to create civilizations and at the same time become civilized by shedding the predatory mind. We continue to be predatory. We went from being hunters and predators and needed as the top predator in the world to being predatory at the level of nations and invented races to justify the exploiting of one group by another group. That's our heavy historical legacy. But the primary story is that of Africa, of the beautiful continent, of the motherland, of the savannas where we all came from. Branch of my family, all my family came from Africa, and a branch went to Central Asia, and that's where they ended up migrating to South America, of all places. And the other branch of the family reached earlier on all the way across the Americas. Not surprised I'm nomadic, because I had the nomad in my genes and my epigenetic influences. Africa. Let me look for that poem I wrote about Africa.